Great. Okay, here to talk about parcel fabric today. It's going to be kind of a technical presentation. We're going to be using ArcMap, and we're using version 10.3 here. So for those that are using the parcel fabric or are interested in some of the editing workflows, hopefully you'll be able to pick up some new ideas here, and then we'll kind of review some of these workflows and then take certainly questions throughout the presentation. Don't hesitate to ask. So we'll jump right into it from there. So I've got some sample data here. This is in the parcel fabric. This is a project we migrated over, and it's a municipality that we've been helping do their parcel workflows for and their editing. Now we've got. Oh, I'm sorry. There we go. I can't see. That's better. Okay, so I'll quickly go over the topics we're going to discuss here. We'll do a split, parcel split using the parent parcel, and then we'll talk a little bit about the plan directory and how we can create new plans when we go to do the workflows. Control points is a big one. I want to talk about bringing in GPS control points from a survey plat and how we can use those in the fabric to make adjustments, as well as splits and combos. We'll look at we'll see if we have the time to look at the easements, but I did want to show you that and some different layers within the fabric. And again, if we have some time, we'll look at fixing any gaps and slivers that are within the fabric. And then also, anytime we have a curve that maybe was mistakenly represented by multiple line segments, I'll show you how we can easily fix those as well. Okay, so first we've got a split that we'll show you here. I've got a subdivision right here, and I'm going to pull up the plat for that. We can see that we've got the plat here. So what we're going to do is divide this into the two lots, 1 and 2. So we're going to take this, and first thing we'll do is come in. We want to do what's called a construct from parent. So I've got the parent parcel here, and I'm going to go ahead and select that parcel, and I'm going to right click, and we'll do construct from parent. And what this is doing is just taking that existing parcel that I have, and we're going to be able to split it, and then when we're done, we'll be able to retire that old parcel as historic, and it'll put that on the historic layer for us as well. What I always like to do is when I construct from parent, I'm going to have this dialog box come up. I always like to show my selectable parent lines, and these lines are all part of the existing parent parcel that you can see here. Now the idea is when you build from this existing parcel, you want to either, if you're going to use the parent parcel lines, then you can use them here. If you're not going to use them, then you do what's called marking them as unbuildable, so it won't take them into account when it does the construction of the new parcel. But I've got on my plat here, if I'm going to zoom in and take a look, I can see I've got a distance of 361.21 on this top side here, so we'll put that in. And I'm going to put that in as a break line. Type that in. So now you can see it created a line point along that north part of that parcel. And if we go back and we can look here, what I could do, I'm not going to do a lot of data entry or COGO here just for the sake of time, but I could go in and change the dimensions here and make sure those are all matching along with the bearings for this particular parcel. But for the sake of time, I'll kind of gloss over that, so I don't want this to be all data entry. But you can see here my parcel is generally represented in this corner adequately. But if you look here, down at the bottom, I've got a curve here, a true curve in the survey plat. And in my parcel fabric, I've got a bunch of small lines here. So what we want to do is we want to fix that and make that a true curve to match what we've got on the plat. So we're going to go ahead and fix that here we're going to mark these as unbuildable because I don't want to use these small line segments. So I'm going to come over here and mark those as unbuildable. And then I'm going to create my new curve in there, and I'm going to give it a radius. And in this case, the radius is 556.3. So I'm going to enter that here. And you can see it curves the opposite direction, so I just changed that to a negative. And once I put that as negative, then it matches that line. So then what I do is for the actual split, I'm gonna come up here and start at point number 14. And here's where I will enter as a new line. And here's where I'm going to do just a little bit of COGO work here. If we look at the plat, we've got 61, 47, 52 is the bearing. And the way the bearings work is you just specify the quadrant. So in this case, I'm in quadrant 4. It's going to the northwest there. So I'm going to specify quadrant 4, and the distance was 100.86. And you'll see it construct that line, and now I'm ready to, instead of digitizing, I could just connect to my point number 15 that I created earlier. So now I'm ready to go ahead and create those new parcels. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to build and mark historic. One more thing I want to point out is I could add a plan here. I can go ahead and create a plan. So if I click on this here, I can put in the information from that survey plat. So I can say create plan, and I'm going to call this Casey's subdivision. I could put any more information I want there in the description. Typically then with the attributes, I can fill out all this information. If it's available on the plat, which it should be, the surveyor, the company, the date. And then for source documentation, I'm just going to show you if we take that, we can actually, I'm going to copy and paste that into there. I just have the plat saved locally on my machine. But I'm going to put that under source documentation. This could also be, you could have the PDF stored on the cloud as well and put a URL in there. So I'm going to do set as active plan. And then you'll see that Casey's subdivision is my plan as I'm splitting these parcels. We're going to go ahead and build and mark historic. And then it'll construct the new parcels and it'll mark the existing one as historic now. All right, so you can see my new parcels there. Now I just need to update the attributes and put in the PIN numbers there. If we look here on our historic layer, you're going to see my historic parcel there shaded in red. And that's very easy to, if I need to for some reason, I can go in and I can toggle that historic parcel on or off, depending on if I need it or not. And when I would do that is if I'm creating a new parcel, or I just have to redo a parcel because the fabric was so, it was off so much. In that case, I would just flag it as historic and just start a new parcel in my workflow. So, so I want to show you too the source document that we put in there, the PDF. In this case, if I'm identifying that parcel, we can easily pull up the record here for the source document. I thought we could. Well, we can link that through the PDF when we click on that parcel to find that information. So, so that's the split. Next, I want to talk about get into those control points. And we can take a look at those here. So there's two things we can do with control points. Control points are useful for any GPS data you have. You can use as control points. Typically, they're going to be section corners, parcel corners. If you can get that information from your surveyors or local engineering company, if they will make that available to the counties, that's tremendously helpful to be able to plug into the fabric. And so in this case, we'll bring those in here. I'm going to bring those in from a CSV file. So here I've got my CSV file. Now, what I want to do is look at our catalog here. I'm going to look at the actual parcel fabric to bring those control points in, and I can just import those right into my fabric. If you have those, we just right-click on our parcel fabric and import control points, and then it'll just ask me for my source of where those are at, and we'll plug that in, and it'll bring those in to the parcel fabric. Any questions so far? And you can define your settings here as far as replacing existing control points. Depending on how close it falls to those, you can define a tolerance and it'll replace those if you want. Or in this case, these are all new points that I have, and I'm going to bring those in, and we'll see those show up then. Now this particular plat that we were working with, we'll pull that back up. I do have some points here that have GPS coordinates. You can see the northing and easting here. So we will go ahead and put in, what I typically do is we'll put in those control points first, and I'll plug those in with their coordinates. And that's right here we have the control points manager to maintain these. So in this particular case, it's got one control point in this view. It's actually one of the city's monuments. They have GIS monuments throughout the city, and those are already in here. But in this case, I'm going to add a new one that I have on the survey plat. And I have those coordinates here. And I can tell it if it's a city. In this case, it's going to be a private surveyor's point. I can put information about the date, the monument type, all of that information I can put in there. I'm going to go ahead and update. We've got to put a name in there for it. In this case, I'll call it West Corner Casey Subdivision. And we see that point came in up here on the top corner. So you'll see if we zoom in here that my control point's a little bit different from the corner of the parcel because the fabric, isn't exactly spatially correct. And that's the purpose of having these control points, is to refine the spatial accuracy of our fabric. So in order to do that, I have to tell it that this control point is associated with this parcel corner. So doing that, I'm going to use this tool, Match Control Point. And we'll select that, and we'll click on our parcel fabric corner that it's associated with. And that's how we link those together. And what I'll show you next is what we want to do with those control points then is we can run an adjustment. And we'll jump to a new area here. So here we've got a parcel where I have some new control points that were brought in, and basically we want to refine this parcel and make it more accurate according to the GPS data we have. And this is typically information, like I said, you can get from your surveyors, or if your agency has your own GPS system or unit you want to take out there and shoot points, you can do that as well and plug those in. In this case, so we're going to turn on our point layer we have, and then I'm going to match these control points. And that's Again, we go in, we have to define which parcel corners these control points are linked to. And looks like it's going to hang up on us. The joys of live demos, right? So what I do is do the match like we just did on the last parcel, match the control points, then running this least squares adjustment, and I think I've already got these matched up. We'll go ahead and do that here now. So I'm going to do the match control point. I'm going to go to jump to my other one. We'll match that one. Okay, and you can see that little red line up here. That does mean the match was successful. So if we go back, now what you want to do one of the adjustments, we can select whatever parcels we want to adjust, which is nice to have that flexibility to be able to adjust those. So in this case, I'm just going to select the 3 of these here. These parcels will now be adjusted according to where those control points are located to improve the spatial accuracy. As you remember, we saw the gap there. Now if we run the adjustment, which is under the menu, we could use adjust. And what this is going to do is a least squares adjustment. I've got my settings defined here, and these are the default settings. I'm going to click run. And up here is where it's going to tell me in the top corner, it's going to give me my results. So it's got a shift, northing and easting, and it's telling you those. So the idea is once I accept these, it's going to, and I rerun it, those offsets should be smaller because it's doing that least squares adjustment. It's continually refining this. Typically, it only takes one, usually a couple iterations. So in this case, I'm going to accept that. Okay, and then I'm going to run it again because we're trying to get that down to 0. Okay, now we're getting close. So I'm going to accept it and run it one more time. And now I'm down to 0 in my northing and easting. So now I'm going to accept that again. I'm going to click OK from my adjustment screen dialog box. And now it's adjusting those parcels to be more spatially accurate according to my control points. And we'll see that here as we zoom back in. We'll see that those are in fact right on my control point now. So that's very useful to be able to refine it spatially and make our fabric more accurate. Any questions on that, on the control points?
Why did you have to run it more than one time?
The reason you have to run it more than one time is because of the adjustment it's doing. It's a least squares adjustment, so it's kind of like you're running those iterations to get down to the exact fit. And I don't have the math to show you in front of it, but it's the way it's calculated is the reason we have to do that more than once. And also because there's multiple parcels that we're also running it on. So, but that's the standard workflow. I could have ran it on a whole subdivision or even the entire city if I wanted. I haven't done that because I'm not sure how long the processing would take on that. But the idea is it's refining that spatially.
I have a question.
Yes.
So I'm assuming that, when you make this adjustment, that all the adjoining parcel polygons are going along with that adjustment?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Yes, exactly. All the neighboring ones.
Geometry of that curve on the parcel split that you did, but the adjoining roadway, that went with it too, that parcel.
Yes. Yep, and that's the idea with the fabric is you're moving adjoining parcels with it together. So to avoid those slivers and gaps that we can have, that's the purpose of it. Yep. Good question. Any others before we continue?
So
Yes.
does it change the attributes of those lines? Let's say I surveyed 100 feet, now it's 127. What?
Good question. The attributes are, and we'll show this here. I'm going to go in and you can see the dimensions here. The dimensions and the attributes are actually what you have within your parcel data. So if I open this up, if I open this parcel, we'll see in my dialog box over here, these distances that are defined by my geometry are what's going to show up on my fabric when I annotate those dimensions. The line itself in ArcMap might actually be 100.28, and maybe in my parcel geometry it's specified as 100 feet. But the line itself, if you actually measured it in ArcMap, may be slightly different. But it's using the dimensions in your parcel data, which is what you would get from your survey plat. Does that answer? Yes?
Not only the parcel polygons, but can you, say, pick other type of polygons, say township, whatever polygons you have made out there, subdivision polygon, can you make that shift along with it?
Yes. And that's, if we look here, let's go back to the layers in the parcel fabric. These are the various layers within the fabric that are just out of the box. You can add additional ones. I've got some extra ones in here, ignore those, but it basically I'll highlight the parcel fabric ones right here. So it's got tax parcels, subdivisions, it's got the cadastral framework. It will adjust those if you have those associated. So like for example, and I don't know if we'll get to this or not, but when you create a parcel, you join it to the fabric, and you do that by selecting the points along the outer edges of that parcel. There's a trace tool where it'll grab every point along that fabric. If you do that correctly on that join process, that is permanent then, and then it'll always move the adjacent parcels together when you run that adjustment. In the case of like a section, an entire section, if you have a section line, if that's not joined properly to, or the parcels aren't joined to that section line, then it won't, the adjustment won't affect both layers. Does that make sense?
Sort of thing.
Muddy, made it muddier. We'll keep going here, and maybe we can answer some of these questions as we move along. So if we want to look at fixing multi-segment curves, we did a little bit of that in the first one when we did the split. But here we have a parcel that's got some issues with it. You can't really tell by looking other than the fact that you don't see the radius labeled. But if I open it up, you're going to see a bunch of dots representing a bunch of little line segments, or in this case, it's just a plain line string. So I want to get rid of that. I want to turn those into curves. And ideally, I'd be looking at a survey plat as my source documentation to be able to fix this. But in this case, I'm going to do another construct from parent. And so now what I want to do is I want to select that parent line, which is a line string right here. I'm going to right click and mark it as unbuildable because I don't want to use this at all in my new solution. I'm going to digitize here my first part of that, which is a straight line. Okay. Then I'm going to go, and I look, this is canned again, so I picked the point where I wanted to have that next curve. I'm going to make this one curve, and then I'm going to have a second curve following it. So at this point, I need to enter the radius. And again, I'd be referencing a survey plat normally to do this, but for the sake of time, we're just trying to fix the curves here. So we'll go to the end. And this one's actually a radius of 60. I'm putting in a negative because it's curving to the left. Okay. And now I'm ready to go ahead and create that new parcel. I'm going to build and mark historic because I want that old one to be historic. Or if I'm just fixing geometry, I might not want that one to be historic. I might not care about it. I'm just going to create the new parcel. Then I would have to just update the name, which would be the PIN number. Bring that in from the historic one. So we'll just take a look at that here quickly. Again, turn on my historic parcels. I'm going to grab the PIN number from my historic parcel. I'm going to copy that. And then I'm going to assign my new parcel the PIN number. Because again, we're just fixing geometry. And then if we go ahead and annotate, you can see, first of all, I'll open my new parcel that we just created. And we don't have any of those little line segments again. We fixed those, we made them true curves. And we'll do annotate. It's just warning me, hey, this parcel already has some annotation, and then we can, it'll generate the radius and the information from that. So you'll find that at times, a lot of times you have curves that were created at some point in time, they got split into multiple segments. It can be a real bugger to get those fixed sometimes, but that's kind of one of the workflows to be able to do those. I've got an example of fixing a gap or a sliver. Again, I was trying to give you examples of real-world examples and not too much, just new out of the box. Wanted to be able to try to show you some real-world examples of how we can fix these, because these are the problems you'll run into. In a lot of these, there's not really a standard workflow. If we look at the parcel workflows, there's not really a standard workflow for some of these. You just have to fix the errors. So in this case, what we've got here is we've got two adjacent subdivisions that are overlapping. So this is one subdivision we've got highlighted here. And we have the neighboring subdivision, which does not line up here. I've got a discrepancy. So in order to fix this, what I need to do, I know that this first subdivision is correct. That's my governing one in this situation. This one was not drawn correctly, or it was joined incorrectly when they created it. So what I'm going to do in this case is I'm going to right-click on the parcel, on the subdivision. I'm going to do a rejoin. And like I said, it might not have been joined correctly the first time. So I'm going to rejoin it and fix those errors this time. And you see your join parcel dialog box come up. And each particular line here represents a point that is tied to the fabric. So this is saying here's your parcel and here's your points along the outside of that parcel. This is where you want it to tie into your fabric. So in this case, I'm looking, this point down here it's matched incorrectly. It shouldn't be matched to this parcel intersection. It should actually be matched to this point up here. And so I know that's point number 11 here in my dialog box. I'm going to remove it. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell it, okay, now you're going to go to this fabric point, and I'm going to correct it. So now it's associated to the correct fabric point. Now I'm going to finish the join process. And we should see our subdivision boundary correct, and then it should be matched up. So there we have the repaired subdivision boundary. And to answer your question earlier then, now if I would run a least squares adjustment, those two subdivisions would move together, as well as the parcels if those are associated and were joined to that correctly.
I see you updated the line information. Can you update, in text, can you do that with the acreage or with the acreage for the polygon? If you've got a
yeah, you could.
Parcel,
Yeah,
parcel,
you could do that. You would just you could either do that in the labeling or create an annotation class.
and it would change on the updates.
I don't know. I mean, if it was labeled, if it was just grabbing attributes, yeah, it could update. If it's an attribute that you have in the field, if it was just a label turned on, yeah, it would update immediately. We can, and let's see, I'm going to keep moving along here. I don't, how much time we got till?
You're good. Yeah, you've got about 15
Okay.
minutes.
I want to look at merge courses. So if we had this one kind of planned. Well, first we'll look at the right-of-way vacation here. So I wanted to show our historic parcels. In this particular location, we had an alley that was vacated, and they had the survey plats done for them, and they wanted to perform this right-of-way vacation within the fabric. So we basically did a split from the old parcels. So it used to show the alley and the parcels, the parcel fabric, and they wanted to vacate that. So I just wanted to show you this because under our historic parcels, we have various colors that can represent, different things that you would retire a parcel for, that you would mark it historic. The nice thing about the historic layer is now you still have the old PIN numbers you still have the history of what has transpired in the past, whether it's splits, combos, whatever that would be. So in this case, it's just showing you an example. If I turn off the historic layer, you can see what those parcels currently look like. But with the historic layer, we know, oh, there used to be an alleyway in there. So just an example of the different features of the historic parcels layer. And then I want to show just the merge courses tool. So if we look at these areas here, I'm going to open this parcel as an example. We can see the dimensions there. You saw how it had 25, 72. It didn't make sense that these would be, split separately because they're intended to be one segment according to the survey plat. It's one segment all the way across there, but maybe there was some cleanup work that wasn't done properly when the parcel was created or when it was digitized. So I want to make that line, I want to make it a single line straight across there. So in order to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to highlight both these parcels. And we're going to do a merge courses. And then it allows you to specify your decimal degrees. So, how big of a bend do you want to correct in there? I'm going to say anything less than 2 decimal degrees and any radius. If I have adjoining like compound curves, if their radius are real close and they match within this 2%, it's just going to make them one curve, a single curve. So it's a pretty handy tool. If we run that here, we'll see it'll update those parcels. And then if I just run my annotation on those again here, we'll see that those are now made into one line segment. So some pretty handy cleanup tools that we have that are available. Again, I didn't go through all of them. I just kind of went through a handful of them. But is there any questions on that? Or on the annotation dimensions? Yes, sir.
I have a question on annotation. I'm trying to get multiple scale annotation in the fabric. Do you know a really decent way to do it? I've tried a few different ways, but it seems pretty clunky. But
You
I don't know
said
if you've tried to do that or not. But
you're trying to get different scales, or you don't
Yeah.
want different scales?
yeah.
Yeah, I've tried it before. It is a little difficult. It can be done. I think you would define that within your annotation class. I know it can be done, but it was a little bit of a workaround. I remember that was a little bit of a hassle. It depends. You can adjust your annotation class if you want, so they would all be at a different scale. But to have multiple scales on multiple different labels, that can get kind of tricky, but it can certainly be done. Any other questions? Yes.
I've got one concerning sort of the workflow or best practices for, I guess we have certified survey maps here in Wisconsin that pile up on top of one another or take part of one. And how many places then put the boundary of the first one in historic and just leave part of it in the current, sort of this simultaneous conveyance current versus the actual boundary. I don't know if you're quite following what I'm trying to say here.
Do you have an overlap in them? You're
Yeah,
saying?
overlapping certified survey map or an overlap of a certified survey map in a subdivision, and it doesn't really change the boundary of that first subdivision. That subdivision's still there, it still exists.
Yeah, but
And the CSMs still exist when they're piled on top of each other, but how do you then label them so the most current one gets labeled?
I would probably set up, so you would want to have both of them. You just want the most current one to be shown and labeled.
Yeah.
So would you put that in the current parcels where it would not be in the historic layer, or are these
Yes.
all historic that you're talking about?
I'm saying, would you put the full boundary of the previous CSM or subdivision in historic?
Yes, you can put, I would recommend putting that in historic, or you could very easily do that. You can put any of these in historic,
Yeah.
whether it's a subdivision or that, but if you have overlaps like that, I think there is ways you can differentiate those within the fabric where it's maybe an intended boundary or where there's a discrepancy. I think there's ways you could do that. Maybe you could use the lots and units layer possibly as another, there's options within there where you can define what this layer is exactly representing. Anything else? Yes, sir.
How many parcels do you typically work with? How many thousands?
We did a project that had 39,000 parcels.
Do you ever run into performance issues in secondary? Have you ever worked with them in SDE?
That was one of my questions. People that are working with the fabric and SDE. There are some major, right now, from what I know, there's some setbacks in working with it in an enterprise environment. We have worked with Esri a little bit on that, on getting some of those issues resolved. We do have someone we work with, though, that does have it in an enterprise environment. He's been able to have it work successfully for him. But I know Esri's aware of some issues there that they're trying to work out, and I think it's just a matter of time before they get those. Yes, sir.
So, in your experience, is it better to clean up your parcel letter before it goes into fabric or after? Because now with these nice tools to clean up what's been.
These are nice tools, but I would definitely do it before. Yeah, it's
And there's
much easier and quicker to do it before. You want to do it in the migration process if you can. You want to clean up as much as possible because this, yeah, they're nice workflows, but it takes longer to do some of the edits. So I would definitely recommend trying to do it before. Yes.
Can you give us a sense of database size of the parcel fabric versus a typical standard geodatabase, the same kind of stuff? Is it comparable size-wise? Is it double the size? Is it?
Let's see. Project. Some of these, let me find you one here. This is one that had roughly 40,000 parcels to it, and size-wise, 335 meg. So, does that kind of give you an idea?
What's the? So is that the fabric or the pre-fabric?
That's the fabric.
What's the one like? A comparable-
Pre-fabric would have been. These are zipped. Here we go. I think this was, but this isn't a fair comparison because he had more data. That the other one I just showed you was just only the fabric populated. This one I think he's got more data, but we'll just take a look at it. It's only 20 meg. So yeah, pretty significant increase in size. Yeah. But you've got more, points, lines, because underneath all those polygons is still points and lines representing that are in different layers. So yeah,
I'm just trying to get a sense that, I've been thinking about migrating there for a couple of years, but we're working with a work group, our GIS server with a 10 gig limitation on the database. My concern is if starting to move that way, is it going to force me to invest in my energy?
How big is your current database? Yeah,
Unless you start
I don't-
scanning in.
I'm at 3. I'm almost at 4 right now.
I don't think you'll have an issue exceeding that.
Got attachments.
You got attachments, you said? No, good question, but I wouldn't anticipate it. I mean, this is, how many parcels are you talking?
Well, right now we have about 20,000 out of 33,000, roughly. Matt?
Okay, because this is 40,000 and it's subdivisions, parcels, lots. He's got about everything. He's got road right of way in there as well. So that's 340 meg. But There's no attachments in that, so that might be a big difference there. As far as the migration goes, if you're looking at migrating, definitely you want to go through and plan accordingly. Plan on having some time where you're going to be interrupting your normal editing workflows where you're converting that over to the fabric. You can obviously save them splits and those changes, and then update those once you get the fabric migrated over to the fabric. But that's a great opportunity for your folks too to learn that if you're going to look at getting familiar with the workflows is to use some of them that you were putting off during that time. Any other questions? All right, thank you.